Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'll be reading Fan Pai by Guāng, Huán, The Villain's White Halo by Hao Dayi Juanwei Shengzhi, chapters 26 through 29. For the moment I have access to the full original text, so I'm updating any inaccurate hanzi or pinyin as I find errors. As always, please remember that this novel is rated mature by the publisher, so check the description for a link to content warnings. Chapter 26. The first round of the flower plucking tournament took the form of 160 matches that occurred in 4 rings, with 4 matches per ring, ending in 10 days. It was set up this way because, in the first round's matches, the disparity of power between the fighters was greater, resulting in less time required per battle. If a fight exceeded the allotted time, a draw would be awarded, and both contestants advanced to the next round. The second round did not confer draws. Matches continued until a winner was decided, or someone yielded in defeat. After the lottery ended, the young cultivators were given a free day to prepare for the upcoming tournament. That day, all of Yes City bubbled with excitement. Every seat in the tea house in town was occupied as applause thundered for the storytellers. How the matches would go, and what moves or spells the contestants would use were the talk of the streets. Folks chattered with confidence and convincing evidence as if they had already seen the duels themselves. The braver of the bunch rushed to build straw huts at the foot of Mount Changmyang to watch the upcoming competition. The huts were a distance away from the rings, but close enough to hear the fights and see some color flash, enough to make folks excited. However, the stars of this grand event were not the citizens of Ye City. The Baopu sect disciples staying beside Xing Shui Bridge in the North District, the disciples of Dianjian sect staying in the Apricot Grove in the West District, the Buddhist cultivators staying near Tong'an Canal in the East District, the disciples of Zhangya staying next to Qiu Shui Lake in the South District, as well as the disciples of various other sects staying downtown in the inns, all reacted differently to the lottery results. They collected intel and analyzed their opponents' strengths and weaknesses, contemplating the moves they would use for their upcoming fights. After they were done worrying about themselves, they couldn't help but worry about their peers. Everyone knew that the Zhangya Mountains and Baopu sect had a poor relationship. In the lottery for the tournament's first round, aside from Yin Biyue and his other companions, only Yuan Xiaolian had drawn a disciple from Baopu sect. She wasn't the one people were most worried about, however. The other 3 matchups at least share similar cultivation levels, but what about Yin Shixiang? Wondered one Zhangya disciple, his face long with worry. Yin Shixiang reached the spirit concentration stage 3 years after joining the sect. That certainly is fast. But I hear He Lai from Baopu sect attained the breakthrough state 6 months ago, even though Duan Changxuan scoffed at the Baopu 7, their reputation nevertheless preceded them. So what if there's a gap in their cultivation levels? Someone countered immediately. Yin Shixiang is the sword sage's disciple. Jin Yu Shixiang won against a grandmaster in the Great Ascension state when he was still just in small ascension. The disciple who had spoken had worshipped Jin Yu since joining the Zhangya Mountains. At his most obsessed, he had even purposely tried to imitate Jin Yu's dress and the way he held his sword. However, not everyone viewed the situation with such strong personal feelings. One of the calmer disciples reminded everyone, cross-level victories are 1 in 100. But I believe Yin Shixiang will win for certain, rang the chiming voice of a girl. It was He Yanyun, her face set. Her confidence was infectious, and others quickly chimed in their support. I believe Yin Shixiang will win too. Yin Shixiang can definitely do this. Contrary to the brimming confidence of Zhangya's disciples, the gambling houses in Ye City had set the odds at 3-7, with those betting on Yin Biyue to win standing to lose more. A rumor was the cause for the steep odds. Somehow, word had started going around that the sword sage's disciple, Yin Biyue, had qi deviated during sword practice, significantly damaging his cultivation. His black hair turning white was the proof. The rumor had been told so vividly that many sect's disciples believed it as fact. Ye City was rich and prosperous, and its gambling houses were large, yet the number of visiting cultivators who gambled there far exceeded that of the locals. Ye City citizens who wanted to gamble had to provide proof of assets before placing any bets to ensure they wouldn't fall into ruinous debt should they lose. Besides this major rule, there were many other related restrictions and laws. Over time, fewer and fewer locals gambled. Visiting cultivators didn't need to abide by the gambling laws, but that wasn't to say they placed bets only for the money. They also wanted to show support for their own sects and bolster their reputations. When Changsheng walked into the gambling house fanning himself and walked out fanning himself still. When he went in, the odds of Ying Biyue's match were still set at 3-7. When he came out, the odds had shifted to 4-6. Impossible! How did he have so much money? The Baopu sect disciples couldn't wrap their heads around this, but they refused to cower. After scraping everything they had together, they found they still didn't have enough to push the odds back in their favor. But the disciples were determined. Shēng will definitely win. Even if we borrow money to place our bets, we'll win it back. Enlightened, the Baopu sect disciples went to Yes City's money house and borrowed a hefty sum to bet on He Lai winning. Ying Biyue was unaware of any of this. He had been in deep meditation, simulating his sword techniques in his mind for 3 days and 3 nights. In his concentrated state, any talk among the people about whether they had confidence in him could not affect him in the slightest. He had confidence in himself. It wasn't until the day of Duan Changsheng's match that Ying Biyue roused from his deep meditation. He changed into Zhang Ya's Taoist robes and straightened his appearance in front of the mirror. When he opened the door, the morning breeze embraced him along with the fragrance of magnolia. He lifted his eyes and happened to lock eyes with Luo Mingchen, who had been waiting under a tree. Duan Changsheng stepped out of his room at the same time. There was not a trace of the nerves that usually preceded a fight on Duan Changsheng today. He was dressed dashingly and exuded the air of a noble without unnecessary extravagance. He looked like he was off to a matchmaking date, not a duel. However, Luo Mingchen's eyes were fixed on Ying Biyue. The latter was not wearing a cloak over his Taoist robes, and without a hood to cover him, his white hair cascaded down his back. Shidi, your Luo Mingchen trailed off, not knowing what to say. Ying Biyue understood Luo Mingchen's concern. I was worried about scaring children on the road before. I'm not ashamed to be seen, so there's no need to hide my face all the time. Now that the flower plucking tournament has begun, it's only right to be open and honest about it. Luo Mingchen felt a pang in his heart when he heard the explanation. His Shidi was an exemplary individual. If it weren't for his actions, Ying Biyue would not need to cover up, and he would not have suffered the mockery of Panlong Ridge brigands because of it. Luo Mingchen's mind soon calmed, however, as determination washed over him. The 1,000-leaf lotus atop Mount Chongmyung would be his. The three headed for the outskirts of the city. Mixed in the endless stream of people were the disciples of various sects and city folk attending to watch the spectacle. Ying Biyue's hair color was particularly conspicuous among the crowd. He didn't care whether the stares directed at him were merely speculative or malicious, but Luo Mingchen did. He discovered that he became agitated when so many people stared at his shidi. It was strange. He didn't know why he felt that way, or what to do about it. Thankfully, contestants were stepping into the ring, and the crowd's attention was soon diverted. Chapter 27. The early morning sun was bright and the weather fair. Though the morning fog had not yet dispersed from the grounds, the crowds gathered at a wide open space the Qinglu sword sect had cleared, aside from a few straggling elms. Although the tournament was said to take place at the foot of Mount Chongmyung, the majestic mountain itself loomed some distance away, only faintly visible through the veil of clouds. Those with a match today had shown up early. The disciples of each sect were settled in the area 50 feet away from the rings, separated by a wooden fence. The team leading elders sat at the front and the rest of the disciples sat behind them. From afar, the 4 massive rectangular stone stages were surrounded by throngs of uniformed cultivators so distinctly grouped that the sects were immediately recognizable at a glance. 100 feet away from the rings were the citizens of Ye City, who had come even earlier than the sects. In fact, to get good seats, they had arrived before the sun was up at the straw huts constructed a few days ago. They had plenty of beverages and snacks, and awaited the beginning of the tournament with almost unbearable excitement. Despite the gathering, the crowd was not at its peak size. Many people missed at least one match in the first round of the flower-plucking tournament. Even the Qinglu sword sect only dispatched an elder that was halfway to Great Ascension State to preside over the competition for the next several days. Duan Chongshen wasn't in the first match, so he waited with Yin Biyue and the others of Zangya sect behind Elder Cheng of Xipyong Peak, and watched the contestants who had just leaped into the 4 rings. There really wasn't anything to watch for in the first 2 matches of the day, as the bouts were between disciples from small sects with little fame who'd barely managed to attain the spirit concentration state. As time passed, while the Ye City folks, amazed by some firelight and smoke, burst into applause, the rest of the elders and disciples below the ring were bored. The only match that might have contained something of interest, Yanjian sect versus Qinglu sword sect, ended in just a few minutes due to the power disparity. Nonetheless, Yin Biyue watched the matches closely, especially the one with Qinglu sword sect. He observed how the fighter activated the might of his sword, how it was brandished, and how it swung to breach the Yanjian sect disciples' defense of the realms. He scrutinized every step taken and the angle of every flick of the wrist, then simulated in his mind the power that Zhongshan, someone in the late breakthrough state, could unleash if he were to use the same techniques. Just then, there was a commotion among the Bao Pu sect's team. The group parted into 2 as a disciple stepped forward. He bowed to his sect elder and didn't forget to nod at He Lai, who stood behind the elder. The elder was wearing a smile so wide his face wrinkled into ripples of folds. He patiently bestowed his instructions to the disciple. Bao Pu sect had also split into 2 groups when they traveled to Ye City, one led by He Lai and the other by the elder, whose group rode in the sect's sky coaster, a flying vessel. This group was different, not because they were stronger than the others, but because they were either kin of Bao Pu sect's elders or juniors from prominent houses. Li Lin was the only son of one of the elders. The administrator of Qinglu sword sect announced, "Ring number 3, Duan Chongshen of the Zangya Mountains versus Li Lin of Bao Pu sect." His voice, injected with vital qi, resounded far and wide. Excitement coursed through the crowd. The disciples who had been idle perked up. Duan Chongshen from Xihua Peak, the sword sage's disciple, someone called out. Others were quick to offer explanations. Apparently, he only entered Xihua Peak through the recommendation of headmaster Xiansheng. The sword sage and Xiansheng were good friends, so he couldn't say no. But Duan Chongshen is a disciple in name only. Before the first person could feel disappointed, someone else added, "But we'll see the sword sage's real disciple fight in a few days. See the Zangya Mountains group over there? The white-haired one is Yin Biyue. He's the second sword wielder under the sword sage." Discussion for the opposing side was also rampant, as Li Lin's name was obviously known to some. Li Lin, his dad is Bao Pu sect's Li Changhang. Someone scrunched up their face. Honestly, I hate facing his kind of people. He's got so many good protection items. Who knows what he's got with him? Even people with higher levels of cultivation would have a hard time winning. I heard his mom is also from a major house, someone else chimed in with a derisive laugh. And didn't he have a nickname before he was 8 years old? The little bully of Heng Duan Mountains? This match is the one to watch today, no doubt about it. Li Ling leaped onto the ring, scanned across the crowd below until his eyes stopped at Zhang Ya's group and smirked. It was an unpleasant smile that dripped with arrogance and contempt. The present him was not the little bully of Heng Duan mountains of the past. He stood 6 feet tall, with prominent muscles and dark golden skin. Though his features had once been quite even, due to many years of slanting his eyes and haughty sidelong glances, and pursing his lips in contempt, his face was quite crooked. However, his large build, coupled with the heavy sword strapped on his back, gave him a formidable presence. He peered down at the crowd with disdain. Duan Chongshen patted the hems of his robes and sauntered into the ring. He wore Zhang Ya's Taoist robes today, though they were still not the same as the others' uniforms. The fabric of his clothes was smooth, luxurious, and sewn with exquisite craftsmanship. The cloud pattern that adorned the cuffs moved and flowed with his stride, the silk shimmering with every step. His hair was drawn up with a jade crown, and his waist was cinched with a silver belt that accentuated his broad shoulders and thin waist. He looked tall and elegant. His refined demeanor didn't particularly stand out when he was next to Ying Biyue and Liu Mingquan, but when he stood opposite Li Lin, the contrast was akin to the one between clouds in the sky and clods of dirt. The feisty female cultivators of Lianjian sect were the first to go wild, screaming up a storm until the Lianjian sect elders shot them a death glare. When they snapped out of it, they realized they had embarrassed themselves, but that didn't stop them from whispering among themselves with red cheeks. Where does he live? How many people are in his family? Is he single? Yin Biyue stared. Could he have made a mistake? Was Duan Chatterbox the real protagonist, based on the way he carried his own halo as soon as he entered the scene? Or was it because the ladies of Lianjian sect judged value based on looks? Up in the ring, the two fighters exchanged a salute. Li Lin's bow was half-hearted, while Duan Chongshen's was flawless. When he straightened, he pointed at his opponent with his folding fan. Please, enlighten me, my friend. His tone had been the same when he had yielded the road to Bao Pu sect. His manners had obviously fired up the female cultivators of Lianjian sect. However, the spectating elders did not see Duan Chongshen favorably. The two fighters were at similar cultivation levels, so it was unwise to give up the first opportunity to strike. They saw this not as confidence, but as arrogance. The Bao Pu sect disciples jeered. Li Lin didn't comment. He wasn't foolish. He wouldn't decline the offer out of gentlemanly manners. Duan Chongshen's actions just made him laugh. Without further ado, he drew his sword and slashed down. A streak of golden light flashed from the ring. His was a 1,000-pound heavy sword. The blade was engraved with intricate runes of array magic that, when he injected his vital qi, beamed brightly and increased the power of his strikes threefold. His attack was straightforward and relied only on the outpouring of an immense amount of vital qi. Someone below the stage recognized the worth of Li Lin's weapon and exclaimed in awe, "That sword is the real deal!" The crafting of such a sword required 5 years of dedication from a master swordsmith and a master rune carver, who were both in the small ascension state. This alone made it obvious how much Li Changhong doted on his only son, and what high hopes he'd placed on him. The female cultivators of Lianjian sect watched with bated breath, as if the young man facing such a powerful strike was their friend or family. Ying Biyue was suddenly seized by worry. Now that he thought about it, he'd never seen the Chatterbox train. If he had been the one to meet this strike, he wouldn't take it head-on. The best way to repel it would be to use the third stance of the Coldwater Blade and turn defense into offense. No, what was he thinking? He would never let Li Ling strike first. The best way to fight such a fast and ferocious strike would be to move faster than the opponent. Not just Ying Biyue, but many present were thinking the same thing. If it were them, how would they parry this attack? To their surprise, a blazing wall of fire appeared in front of Duan Chongshen. He's a spiritual cultivator? What magic is that? It's so fast! No, he didn't make any hand seals. There's not a bit of vital qi rippling at all. Someone with a sharp eye shouted, "It's not magic, it's a fire talisman!" A fire talisman? Are you sure? Ying Biyue relaxed. He knew about Duan Chongshen's fire talismans. He had used one to clean out the caves they'd stayed in. The talismans were quite handy and made no smoke or ash. Ying Biyue had been shocked at first, even though the flames then had been far from the current size. In the age of sages, cultivators' usage of talismans had been as commonplace as meditation. At the time, the power of talismans could cleave mountains. However, hundreds of thousands of years later, during the age of spiritual decline, the art of talisman making had been lost. Presently, cultivators proficient in rune magic could only engrave spells on weapons. They were far from able to condense immense power upon a thin sheet of talisman paper. Occasionally, a talisman with its magic still intact would be discovered in an ancient ruin, but its price on the black market was always hyped to an unfathomable sum. Even as the crowd witnessed the fire talisman with their own eyes, many still refused to believe it was real because of this. Li Lin tugged a black shield from his Qian Kun sleeve and dispersed the flames, though cracks crawled across the shield's surface after the impact. Without missing a beat, he slashed again with his sword. The apparition of an 8 trigrams array manifested from the attack's golden light and slammed toward Duan Chongshen. The crowd went wild. Bao Pu's 8 trigram sword? The elder of Bao Pu sect smiled. He'd recognized that Duan Chongshen's move had been the manifestation of a fire talisman. But so what? To waste a precious talisman in the tournament's first round was the action of an unskilled man, or a stupid one. Neither were cause for concern. Was he going to take out a second talisman? A third one? Nonsense. Then the elder's smile froze. A slip of yellowed talisman paper appeared at the tip of Duan Chongshen's finger and fluttered in the cool summer breeze. The blaze grew and barreled upward, devouring Li Lin's attack in a flash. Duan Chongshen had slowed down during his attack, allowing everyone in the audience to see his move clearly. The audience blew up. That really is a fire talisman. He has 2 of them. Dear heaven above, how much could they have cost? 3,000 gold, 800 spirit stones, 70 den of East Sea mermaid pearls, a grand estate in the best feng shui location? Li Lin's eyes widened in disbelief. He had a talisman as well, a last contingency item his father had given him. He'd never imagined his opponent would use 2 talismans just like that, and now the raging fire was nearing the tips of his eyebrows. Without hesitation, he hurled out a giant bell. The Twilight Crow Bell. Now that's a good item. But with the fire talisman already in play, his rare defensive spiritual device didn't cause much of a stir. Aside from the pain of parting with a treasure, Li Lin was furious. His abundant wealth in spiritual devices had always been his greatest advantage, and he refused to believe Duan Chongshen could have many more talismans. When Duan Chongshen used them all up, he would slay him. The golden light of his sword reflected in his bloodshot eyes. He'd already lost his composure. Thus, the following scene repeated itself over and over again. Li Lin lunged, and Duan Chongshen nonchalantly flung out a talisman, dispelling the strike and draining the power from one of the spiritual devices Li Lin had unleashed. The spectating cultivators were stupefied by the fight. The Zangya disciples and the female cultivators of Yanjian sect forgot to laugh and chatter, and even Baopu sect forgot to curse. The Ye city folks watching the competition in the distance celebrated louder and louder each time they watched the towering fire that seemed to devour the ring. The Qinglu sword sect elder, who was halfway into the Great Ascension state, focused his mind and began to divine. Soon his face paled. Before anyone realized it, the matches in the other 3 rings stopped. No one said a word about it either. Everyone, both inside and outside the rings, was watching as one fire talisman after another flew into the air. Raging fire burst out of nothing again and again. Faced with the billowing flames, Li Lin was engulfed by surging rage. Once more, fire barreled toward him. He braced with his sword and hurried backward, but it was too late. The fire coiled around the tip of his sword and surged along the blade. The sword's momentum was draining his vital qi at flying speed, and his spiritual devices were all damaged by the fire talismans. Li Lin struggled on, his temper flaring, until a curtain of cold water appeared before him. He had hurled out his water talisman, the contingency his dad had left him, the last spiritual device he had. He looked up to see Duan Chongshen fanning his folding fan and smiling. Shock hit Li Lin like a bucket of cold water. He realized that every inch of his spiritual meridian ached like it had been burnt. The scalding was caused by the depletion of his vital qi from relentless sword attacks. If he continued to fight, he would sustain internal injuries. Fire roared to life again, and Li Lin tumbled out of the ring. The enraged Baopu sect disciples came to their senses and spouted curses. Relying purely on talismans in a duel is shameless, absolutely shameless. If they'd been the ones to overpower others with their spiritual devices, they would have been proclaiming the profound wealth of their sect. However, since the tactic was used to crush them, they were sullen as could be. Duan Changshen chuckled. The towering elm beside the ring rustled in the gentle breeze, bathing him in dappling light. It looked as if there had been no duels here, nor any streaks of golden light or raging fires, only a fine, graceful young noble whose easy smile was as gentle as a cool breeze swirling around the bright moon in an embrace. Breezily, he asked, "How could such a man be worth my effort?" Before the disciples of Zangya Mountains could shout their jubilation, screams erupted from the Anjian sect. "Duan Shixiang! Duan Shixiang! Look over here, Duan Shixiang! Are you single, Duan Shixiang?" This time not even the death glares from Lian Jian sect's elder could suppress their frenzy. Many years later, Duan Changshen would become a prominent figure, and this ridiculous match would enter the history books with the description unconventional. But at the moment, no one was using such subtle or implicitly complimentary terms. At the foot of Mount Qiangming and in the marketplaces of Ye City, whenever the match was mentioned, most would comment, "Unbelievable, was it real?" and "He's too rich." Duan Changshen had invented a new style of combat at the flower plucking tournament. Chapter 28. On this peaceful, tranquil morning, as Duan Changshen strolled down the street, someone pushed open their window and shrieked in excitement. "Young Master Duan is here!" Duan Changshen's fanning hand turned clammy with cold sweat. A great clamor erupted, and clouds of dust kicked up as maidens, lifting their long skirts and waving their handkerchiefs, tore down the stairs of their pavilions, whether from the back streets or the inns, in a flurry of perfumes and silk. In the blink of an eye, both sides of the street were flooded by ladies. Some had painted on delicate plum blossom makeup mashed with hairpins of golden pearls, while others had just risen and hadn't had the time to paint their faces, so they were wearing silk veils and their hair was loose. Regardless of their looks, they stared transfixed at Duan Changshen, their eyes shining with an unknown fire. Yin Biyue and Dua Mingchen unconsciously sped up to get away from him. "Wait for me, you two!" Duan Changshen quickened his pace to keep up. This was Yin Biyue's first time seeing such a scene, and he was a little stunned by the madness. "Your reputation spread this far already?" The gathering comprised the ladies of Ye City. The female cultivators from Lianjian sect wouldn't go this far. Since Duan Changshen's return from his match that day, Qiu Shui Lake had become a bustling place. Different girls would happen to pass by every day to admire the lakeside landscape. Every morning, outside the gates of the small courtyard the three were staying in, piles of handkerchiefs and hand-sewn perfume pouches appeared. The other Zangya disciples were elated by seeing so many beautifully dressed girls every day. Their backs were no longer sore, their legs no longer ached, and they were pumped full of energy during sword practice. Thought had occurred to Yin Biyue, however. What if one day one of the girls turned evil and threw a lightning ball at them? To mitigate this potential danger, namely a flying projectile from above, he installed a simple protection array using the flags Yan Xing had left behind. The atmosphere had improved afterwards. "Sorry for all the trouble," Duan Changshen smiled sheepishly. Dua Mingchen flashed him a reluctant, resigned smile in return. "It's not your fault." When Yin Biyue looked at the embroidered handkerchief flapping in the wind hung over their courtyard wall, his mouth twitched. "Are you still going out today?" Of the 16 matches in today's tournament, Zangya disciples were fighting in 4, among which was Dua Mingchen versus Baopu sect. Duan Changshen would have gone without a doubt in the past. Now, as soon as he stepped out the door, the passionate gazes of the maidens outside glued onto him, hot enough to burn holes in his robes. Duan Changshen stiffened as though an unpleasant experience was on his mind. He gritted his teeth against the discomfort. Yes, why wouldn't I? Almost all of Zangya's disciples would be watching the competition today, as there were a number of matches involving their sect. The three followed the massive crowd out. The breakfast stalls on the streets opened at daybreak. Vapor from steaming baskets and white fog mingled in the air before the morning breeze dispersed both. Restaurant waiters opened the windows on the second floor, sat down the benches and chairs, and hung the colorful banners of their businesses. In the empty, quiet, long street, the cries and clicks of cicadas could occasionally be heard. "Don't be nervous, just do your best," He Yin Yin told Ruan Xiaolian in a low voice while patting her shoulder. "We'll feast on Tai He Pavilion's roast chicken afterward." Several other disciples surrounded them and encouraged Ruan Xiaolian in quiet voices, providing her with a slew of ideas. These same disciples weren't worried at all about Liu Mingchen, whose match was also today. They never said, "Liu Shixiang is so powerful he'll definitely win," but they couldn't imagine a scenario where he would lose. It was a baffling sort of confidence, one that was entirely unreasonable. Yet Liu Mingchen was the kind of man who inspired such thoughts in Zhang Ya's disciples. Yin Biyue glanced at Liu Mingchen beside him. He was the same as always. His steps were steady and his expression neither overly solemn nor contemptuous. He still wore his simple yet dignified Zhang Ya Taoist robes, every detail from his tied hair to the collar meticulously neat. Whether he was walking along the rugged mountain paths of Zhang Ya, or Yes City's long streets that led to a duel, his demeanor remained unchanged, giving the illusion of eternal constancy. Although Liu Mingchen did not put on airs, he looked proper with a trace of solemnity, obviously a man of noble stature, clueless to romance. Yin Biyue, meanwhile, was white-haired, dour, and obviously unfriendly. In contrast, a small smile always played on Duan Chongshen's lips, giving him the look of a dashing young master. As his talkative nature hadn't yet been exposed, he was the most pleasing to a young maiden of 16. Thus, in Yes City, almost every girl would say, "Jade-crowned, white-robed, landscape-fanned, which Guāng fanned the hearts of Yes City." Fortunately, after reaching the tournament grounds, 2 miles outside of the city, where Qinglu sword sect disciples were on guard, the girls couldn't come closer. Knowing Duan Chongshen had no matches that day, they reluctantly left. Yin Biyue heard the chatterbox heave a long sigh of relief. The crowd below the rings today was visibly larger, because 2 of the matches were particularly worthy of attention. Both Liu Mingchen and Zhang Shen were set to take the stage today. Overwhelming victory for them was a foregone conclusion, but many wanted to watch how they would fight and what rhythm they'd bring to their duels. Qinglu sword sect disciples were especially large in number, surrounding the 2 fighters in great fanfare, like stars encircling the moon. Yin Biyue gazed far into the distance and noticed someone familiar. It was junior sect leader Song, whom they'd encountered on the northern outskirts of Ye City. He was talking to a man beside him, who had a long sword hanging from his waist. Indeed, at first glance it wasn't the man's face or figure Yin Biyue noticed, but his sword. It was as if the sword possessed the peculiar power of attracting the undivided attention of every sword cultivator in the area. Duan Chongshen leaned in close to whisper. The man beside Song Tong is Zhongshan. Just then, Zhongshan happened to lift his eyes. In that split second, his piercing gaze flew through the crowds and the rings and struck like lightning on Yin Biyue. Almost out of an instinct for danger, Yin Biyue's vital qi surged forward. His sleeves billowed from the force, and every muscle in his body pulled taut with the tension. He was ready to draw his sword at any moment. Duan Chongshen, the one closest to him, subconsciously stepped back. Abruptly, a white-robed back blocked Yin Biyue's vision and Zhongshan's gaze. Liu Mingchen had stood in front of him. It had taken him just a few steps forward, easy as a breeze, but the simple act had shielded Yin Biyue. Liu Mingchen openly met Zhongshan's eyes. Song Tong seemed to have sensed something and turned his eyes to follow Zhongshan's gaze, only to find Liu Mingchen and a group of Zhang Ya's disciples. Song Tong gave a nod, which Liu Mingchen returned. The bell rang, signaling the start of the tournament. Every sect returned to their spots as if that exchange hadn't occurred. It'd taken mere moments for Zhongshan to look over, and for Luo Mingchen to exchange greetings with Song Tang. No one else had noticed. However, the moment was etched in Yin Biyue's mind. He could now be certain that Zhongshan, who was at his peak in the breakthrough state, was well on his way to reaching small ascension. His regard had carried undisguised scrutiny and animosity, even though this was their first meeting. But Yin Biyue's attention was soon diverted when Luo Mingchen walked toward the ring. Luo Mingchen of the Zangya Mountains versus Wang Zhen of Baopu sect, came the sonorous announcement, coupled with an eruption of hollering from the Zangya disciples. The Baopu sect disciples, meanwhile, looked gloomy. Leave the ring of your own volition after exchanging a few moves, He Lai said to Wang Zhen. Don't lose too badly and embarrass the sect. Wang Zhen had always followed He Lai's lead, and he had no objection whatsoever to the instructions. Yes, Shēng. Truth be told, he also thought matching with the chief disciple of the Zangya Mountains was rotten luck. He didn't plan on throwing more punches than he had to. That'd be absurd. He had already decided how he would gracefully yield after exchanging a couple blows, to act as if he was magnanimous for not fighting. Even though admitting defeat meant losing face, it was better than being thrown out of the ring. With that plan in mind, he stepped into the ring. After they saluted each other, he raised his voice. I have long heard of the great reputation of Zangya's chief disciple. I am truly in awe of your profound cultivation, and I know myself to be no match. Wang Zhen's speech hinted to Luo Mingchen that his cultivation and status were both higher than his, so it wouldn't be a glorious victory if he won. He also figured that Luo Mingchen wouldn't be as heavy-handed now out of courtesy. Luo Mingchen didn't respond. He simply smiled in acceptance of the other's praise. Yin Biyue felt he was more focused than the two in the ring. He wanted to see how Luo Mingchen would attack. The guard pupil technique? No, that was either a contingency or a finishing move. He wouldn't use it so early on. Crush his opponent directly with sheer vital qi? That would be brutish. Use spells that controlled the vitality of plants? Yin Biyue glanced at the large elm beside the stone platform. That seemed the most likely. All eyes were focused on the match. Under the gaze of thousands, Luo Mingchen grasped his sword. It caught everyone by surprise. What's going on? Luo Shixiang still uses his sword? So that sword isn't just for show? Unlike the others, what Yin Biyue noticed was Luo Mingchen's odd grip, and that Chen Zhou remained sheathed. Luo Mingchen was holding the sheathed Chen Zhou level with his chest, as though he was holding a long rod. What was he thinking? Luo Mingchen's opponent, Wang Zhen, was about to find out. Without warning, Wang Zhen drew his sword and lunged. A spinning 8 trigrams image appeared where the tip of his sword pierced the air. He used his most reliable and most practiced style, Bao Pu, 8 trigrams sword. However, before his sword's momentum came within 3 feet of his opponent, Luo Mingchen moved. He raised his still sheathed sword high and brought it down heavily, like a bludgeon to the head. The blow knocked aside Wang Zhen's sword, broke through his vital qi shield, and struck him directly on the right shoulder. Crack! Everyone below the ring heard the clear sound of bones breaking. The blow had been so fast and so brutal that it caught everyone off guard, yet it had been delivered so honestly and without a hint of malice that it felt as if the strike was an inevitable response. Luo Mingchen's figure blurred. Mere moments later, he reappeared behind Wang Zhen and delivered a second strike. Wang Zhen swung his sword backwards, only to hit Luo Mingchen's sheath. Wang Zhen's vital qi rippled, disturbed, and his sword slipped out of his hand. In the same breath, Luo Mingchen's sword came down for a third time, hitting Wang Zhen squarely in the spine. Yin Biyue was astonished beyond belief. Someone below the ring finally recognized the move and yelled out the answer. Len Yuan Academy's disciplinary whip! Some disciples in the throng had also come out of the academy, and when they looked closer, they agreed. It's true, that's the disciplinary whip right there. Yin Biyue didn't know how to feel. He hadn't expected Luo Mingchen would choose this method to duel. The academy's disciplinary whip wasn't actually a whip style, but a disciplinary action performed by teachers on unruly students. They didn't need to use whips. When they encountered rule-breaking, ungovernable students, they'd just as easily grab a locust branch or use bamboo sticks. Oftentimes, a wooden rod was used to realize the true meaning of the disciplinary whip. Yin Biyue grasped what was happening now. Luo Mingchen was using his sword as a rod. Back when they were at the academy, the teacher who had taught debates was getting on in years and hadn't the energy, so he'd asked his most mature and dependable student, Luo Mingchen, to wield the whip on his behalf. Lashing a student was a task that made enemies, but Luo Mingchen was so fair and honorable with his executions that no one harbored resentment toward him. In the name of the teacher, I will punish you. This was the essence of the disciplinary whip. As a teacher disciplining the student, of course, it was within his right. It was justified. Except Luo Mingchen wasn't Wang Jin's master, which made the beating insulting. I will punish you on your master's behalf. The Baopu sect elder's face turned stormy. Chapter 29. Once Luo Mingchen's attack was revealed to be the Lanyan Academy's disciplinary whip, many read the underlying meaning. Unable to dodge, Wang Jin took 5 hits in a row, feeling so much pain, it was as if his bones had all shattered. Luo Mingchen was attacking too fast, leaving him no time to speak, but if this kept up, he could sustain severe internal injuries. Wang Jin gritted his teeth hard. Throwing his and his sect's dignity out of the window, he was just about to shout "Yield" when he paled and felt cold sweat drench his skin. He couldn't speak. Distracted and distressed, he let another blow strike him, and his back screamed with pain. The audience could only see Luo Mingchen moving faster and faster, the blur of his heavy blows forming a large net that enveloped his opponent. Wang Jin was flabbergasted, his eyes bulging in disbelief, yet he couldn't utter a single word. He had no sword in his hand, and his vital qi was already depleted from his fight to survive the rod. At this point, he could only duck pathetically, except even when Luo Mingchen stopped channeling his vital qi and started fighting purely with martial arts, Wang Jin couldn't dodge fast enough. Yin Biyue thought this fight was fishy. There was no reason he could see that Wang Jin wouldn't just admit defeat already. Then he remembered that one of the many strikes of the disciplinary whip was meant to seal off the airflow of the throat to prevent punished students from disrupting order with their yelling. The move was similar to the silence spell. However, it had been abolished 300 years ago. No one used it now. If Yin Biyue hadn't pored through the thousands of texts in the Hall of Night Study, which contained the history of the Academy, he would never have known about it. Luo Mingchen's disciplinary whip was harder, harsher, and truer to the spirit of the punishment than what the Academy currently used to keep students in line. But no one in the audience knew. Aside from marveling at Luo Mingchen's vast knowledge, unsurprising that he knew the moves since he had studied at the Academy, only a few noticed Wang Jin's state. I can't believe that guy's got such grit. He's not yielding even when injured like that. As soon as Wang Jin's peers heard that compliment, one of the older disciples scoffed. What does that matter? He's a fool, fighting over pride. If he hurt a spiritual meridian, how will he pursue his cultivation? Don't imitate him. The rest of the group nodded in agreement, but they were in the minority. Many disciples from other sects knew Luo Mingchen as the elder Shēng of the Zangya Mountains and had an excellent impression of him. That guy should admit his defeat. The longer he drags it out, the longer Luo Shēng has to beat him. How exhausting. Luo Shēng is so generous. He knows his opponent doesn't have any power to fight. Look, he's not even using his vital qi in the attacks. A few of these comments drifted into the ears of the Baopu sect, and despite their anger and indignation, they were also incredulous. The rings were shielded with a protection array to prevent the overflow of vital qi from harming the audience, as well as isolation barriers to stop strong individuals from interfering and influencing the matches. Only the host, Qianglu sword sect, could manipulate the arrays in case of emergencies to avoid serious casualties. In the current situation, Luo Mingchen had stopped channeling his vital qi, and Wang Jin was only suffering flesh wounds. He was at no risk of fatal harm. Since Wang Jin refused to yield, the elder overseeing the match had no reason to intervene. The first round of the tournament had a time limit after all. The winner would be declared once the time was up. He Lai had a feeling something was wrong. He and Wang Jun had come to an agreement before the latter went into the ring. He studied Wang Jun's face carefully, and a possibility dawned on him. Wang Jun couldn't yield in defeat. He Lai's face fell. Yin Biyue also found the situation odd. Logically, to silence his opponent was not an honest approach, and it went against the way of the gentleman. Then he heard Duan Chatterbox chuckle. The chatterbox shuffled closer. Si shi xiang. The first to spread the rumor about your cultivation being damaged because of qi deviation was Wang Jun. After their journey together, Duan Changshen's hostility toward Duo Mingchen had dissipated. He wouldn't mind his tongue before, so Duo Shixiang wants to make sure he can't speak up anymore. Yin Biyue suddenly recalled what Duo Mingchen had said at Panlong Ridge. There will be times when we must draw our swords. Duo Mingchen was not a total bleeding heart. He had his principles and his methods. He wouldn't abuse his power to bully others, nor would he allow himself to be bullied. Truly, he embodied the idea that a gentleman knows what to do and what not to do. Yin Biyue's previous understanding of Duo Mingchen had been far too simplistic. At long last, as if he'd spent every ounce of his energy, Wang Jun cried out, his voice hoarse, "I yield!" At the same time, the bell rang. The administrative disciple of Qinglu sword sect announced, "Time is up. This match is over. Winner, Duo Mingchen of the Zangya Mountains." Duo Mingchen stayed his hand and leaped down from the ring. Baopu sect disciples immediately rushed up to carry out the black and blue Wang Jun. This duel had begun in an unexpected way and ended equally so. The Zangya disciples didn't cause a ruckus again. Perhaps it was because the other side looked too miserably battered, or they were influenced by Duo Mingchen's gentlemanly bearing. Regardless of the reason, they showcased the manners befitting a major sect, courteous and polite, cool in the face of both favor and disgrace. Nonetheless, a reserved yet proud smile hung on everyone's face, as if they shared in the triumph. It was precisely this behavior, acting as if victory was the most natural outcome, that the Baopu sect found even more humiliating and frustrating than cheers. He Lai, however, had calmed. He remembered his match with Yin Biyue the next day. It was excellent timing. Since the moment he'd stepped foot in Ye City to the duels of the past few days, whether it be Duan Changshen or Duo Mingchen, both filled him with overflowing rage. It felt as if a fire burned inside of him that would grow to immolate him if it remained unvented. A commotion erupted on Qinglu sword sect's side. Zhang Shen was about to enter the ring, and his presence pulled everyone's attention his way. Zhang Shen's opponent was an unknown disciple who hailed from a remote place in the southern continent. He was more defeated than he was nervous. Aside from his frustration with his bad luck, he seemed to have accepted his fate. Rather than the disciples' reaction, the crowd was more concerned with Zhang Shen's performance. Quiet descended upon the tournament grounds. People were worried that the smallest distraction would have them miss Zhang Shen's attack. On the southern continent, never mind the other 4 continents, not many had personally met Zhang Shen. Despite his immense renown, he did not have an eye-catching appearance. Maybe it was because the sword that hung at his waist was so dazzling that it overpowered its wielder's brilliance. Gazing at him, Yin Biyue only noticed his straight, linear brows and his thin, pallid lips. Yet he couldn't forget those lightning-sharp eyes that had pierced him this morning. This was a dangerous man. The 2 fighters stood in the ring. When the unknown disciple met Zhang Shen's eyes, he suddenly screamed, "I can—" A loud rumble echoed through the ring. Immediately following the large noise, the figure of a person shot into the air before crashing into a heap at the edge of the ring. His landing raised a cloud of dust, while blood spewed past his lips from a blow to his midriff. The sword Feng Yu had caused injury without being unsheathed. It happened so fast, by the time the crowd registered the attack, Zhang Shen had already descended from the ring and left, heading back to the city and not Qinglu sword sect. No one called out to stop him. It was silent both in and out of the ring. Yin Biyue's expression grew solemn. He saw what had struck Zhang Shen's opponent first wasn't the vital qi around the scabbard, but the overflowing sword qi. The strike had seemed indifferent, relying solely on superior cultivation and violent vital qi to cause harm. What made Yin Biyue wary was the level of sword art Zhongshan had exhibited. He was lightning fast with perfect control. The other three rings hadn't even finished their opening salutes by the time Zhongshan's match was over. The administrative disciple began to prepare for the next duel to take place in the ring. Yuan Xiaolian of the Zangya Mountains versus Zhou Yue of Baopu sect. Yuan Xiaolian flashed He Yan Yun a reassuring smile and lifted her skirt to walk into the ring. She took her place just as the crowds recovered from the shock of Zhongshan's match. Carrying no weapons and wearing a white dress with a silver belt and frost-colored slippers, Yuan Xiaolian looked like a delicate white lotus shivering in the cold wind. Compared to the vibrant and bold female cultivators of Yanjian sect, her daintiness caught the attention of many male disciples. Even the usually reserved and taciturn Qianglu sword sect began to whisper among themselves. Her opponent grinned. Zhou Yue had been worried when he first drew the Zangya Mountains from the lot pot, especially when he heard his opponent was similar in cultivation level. But when he saw his match was a frail girl, he congratulated himself on his good luck. After the two exchanged a salute, Zhou Yue opened his mouth in an attempt to flirt. Shimei. Before he could even utter a whole sentence, a fist, powered by immense vital qi, came slamming toward his face. Startled by the rapid punch that materialized mere inches from his skull, Zhou Yue drew his sword and frantically stepped back. Many had assumed that since both competitors were at similar cultivation levels, the match would drag on for a long time. They watched in stunned silence as the delicate white lotus pummeled the much larger man using her bare fists, each punch landing with brutal force. Under the barrage, Zhou Yue couldn't make a move at all. Xiao Lian practices the mountain-flipping fist, as if she'd be intimidated by flashy and substantial sword techniques. He Yan Yun couldn't stop herself from crowing. Then Changshen softly cleared his throat and said to Yin Biyue, "It's similar to our Shijie's Thunder Fist." Yin Biyue could also see it now. Yuan Xiaolian might not have an advantage against many others, but Zhou Yue's sword style relied on clever tricks. His moves were intricate, but he hadn't mastered them thoroughly. Unfortunately for him, he had run into someone like Yuan Xiaolian, who believed in one overwhelming brute force attack to defeat all techniques. Being beaten to a pulp was his only fate. Some of the disciples from Qianglu sword sect had turned their heads away, unable to watch the match any further. Of course, it wasn't only because Zhou Yue was getting walloped, but because they didn't know how to face Yuan Xiaolian, who had rolled up her sleeves as the fight continued on. Yin Biyue felt for them. The devastating blow of having the image of your idol shattered was akin to qi deviation. As the sun dipped in the western horizon, the faint thump of the evening drum inside the city sounded from a distance. A few birds, mere dots in the sky, were on their way back to their nests. Another day of the flower-plucking tournament matches had come to an end. As the juniors of the cultivation world retired for the night, some discussed in excited voices what they had learned from watching the matches today, while others listened to words of encouragement from their peers as they worried about their own matches. They eventually scattered in different directions. Yet they all walked with conviction, even if their hearts were filled with unease and anticipation for the future. The setting sun cast long shadows, but rather than feel suspenseful, it highlighted their exuberance. As the tournament continued, some sects rejoiced, and some sects grieved. As of today, the Zangya Mountains' advancement rate had been fairly decent, upholding their top spot in the One Mountain and Three Taoist sects. As for the Mingchen and Zhongshan's matches, the ordinary Ye city folks hadn't known the significance of what they saw and were even a little disappointed by the lack of chills and thrills. Nevertheless, for cultivators, those two matches had held great importance. Zhongshan had lived up to his reputation. Even when his sword, Feng Yu, remained sheathed, his presence had been formidable. The other match, on the other hand, provided more fodder for conversation. News about the tournament spread quickly, so from Ye City to the southern continent, everyone knew Zhang Ya's chief disciple, Luo Mianquan, had disciplined a Baopu sect disciple. At those remarks, the Baopu sect disciple desperately countered with, Zhang Ya has always been full of bullies. Do they actually think we've no talent in our sect? He Shixiang will be fighting the Sword Sage's disciple tomorrow. We'll show them what manners from a major sect look like. The Baopu sect had brought 28 participants to the tournament, and 5 had already been eliminated in the first round. Compared to smaller sects, this advancement rate was quite high. However, Baopu sect had always considered themselves to be on par with the Zhangya Mountains. The difference in advancement rate made them seem inferior. More importantly, the incidents of the past few days had left them deeply infuriated. This made the match against Yin Biyue the next day significant. It was not just He Lai. Every Baopu sect disciple felt a burning rage in their chest demanding an outlet. As the match approached, He Lai seemed to calm on the surface, but deep down his excitement was growing. Tomorrow he would gain fame for defeating the Sword Sage's disciple. How could he not look forward to it? In the small lakeside courtyard under the magnolia tree, Yin Biyue also found tranquility. Tomorrow would be his first fight after descending the mountain and entering the secular world. Many might come to watch him, but he didn't see it as anything special. He had observed many duels in recent days, and his fighting spirit was at its peak. He needed a match to test the insights he'd gained. That was all. That's all for this time. Join me again next time. Thanks for watching.